Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. I'm your host, Diane Gibbs, and this is episode 273. We're getting closer and closer to that 300. I actually don't know who's going to be number 300 because I haven't done all the math with all the people and the scheduling, but I'm super excited to have you back on. I know we tried to do this a couple weeks ago, and Hurricane Michael messed up our audio.
So can I do another 27 shows so I can be 300?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. No.
So today's a big day for Logo Lounge because so this happens once a year, right?
Well, actually, it happens about every year and a half to 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not something that happens every year.
It's not just Halloween.
Right. But today is the last day that you can sign up and upload your logos. You are not limited by number, right?
No, it's you, and let's get this whole commercial thing over with now, so that I don't feel so icky. Logo Lounge does this about every 2 years, as Diane indicated. And one of the things that happens here is that you have to buy a membership. It's $100. Let's just get that out of the way here. But it's usable all year long as this amazing resource for inspiration and as you're doing your research on any identity design. But you can upload unlimited logos. And if you're really smart and you picked up a membership today, you can upload for this book. And then anything that's uploaded from tomorrow on is eligible for the next book. So there you go.
Awesome. So to me, this is the best resource for, it's an actual book there are people who are, it's not just Bill and his crew doing these selections.
Oh, no.
You have different people each year for each book are doing these selections. So this is a huge honor, but think about any other competition that I know of. None of them are most of them are like $250 per one piece, right? So to me, this is
really
huge.
Pricey.
So not only as a huge resource, but it's also from all over the world.
Yeah, so we literally have thousands of members from more than 100 countries around the world. I didn't know there were that many countries, around the world. But it's one of those deals where the jurors for this, and if you anybody who knows anything, our juror chair this year is Sagi Haviv from Chermah and Geismar and Haviv. I'm going to just run through the list. So Marina Willer, who is a partner in Pentagram. In the London office, both Ryan Rhodes and his partner, Caleb from Land in Austin, Texas. We were talking about Austin just a minute ago. Jaren van Eerden from the Netherlands, Holland. George Bakwa from the Eastern Bloc, somewhere in there, but he's in New York, so he counts. Gabby Brink from Tomorrow Partners. Who am I missing here? Jay Fletcher from South Carolina. And somebody is going to club me. Oh, and Jen Hood from Hoodspa. The good Hood, by the way. And by the way, she's bringing the queso to the party, so you know that it's going to be a serious party when all the judges get together. But what an incredible panel. And as we were talking just a minute ago, there are, if for no other reason, go to Logo Lounge today and keep hitting refresh, because on the front page of Logo Lounge, you always see up in the corner the logo that was most recently updated. And there will literally be close to 10,000 logos uploaded to the site just today. It's always like that on the final day. And I'm always sure that it's going to break, but it doesn't. But you can sit there and every time you renew, that logo changes, and it's just amazing to see the content kind of come flying in.
So this is book 11, and it says and I'm going to just switch real quick so people can see this while we are talking about it.
Sure.
So Logo Lounge, for anybody listening, LOGOLOUNGE. And so here is this most recently added. And then is this how many has just been added for this one issue?
No, that's the total number on the site. Okay. And I've got to put my glasses on, getting close.
It's 294,853.
And I think when we put out the call for entry that we are around 265,000, maybe something like that. So it's just an incredible number of logos that are coming. We were just talking, what an amazing honor it is to be included in this thing if they pick your work, because if you think about it, there's 2,500 logos that end up in one of these books. Along with all of the case studies and everything else. But 2,500 out of 30,000 plus exceptional logos that have been entered just for the book. It's got to be the largest competition period in design. Yeah. So.
Well, one of the reasons I think is because it is affordable, but it's the only competition that I know of that's actually serves also as a resource. So to me, it's It's a great thing that you have. It's kind of a membership, and then you upload, so you get. I don't know. I just think it's great value.
Let's put the competition and the book aside for a second.
Okay.
Let's just talk about the site, which is so cool because here's how this whole thing kind of quasi came about, was the idea that everybody has books of logos in their office, and they feel good and they're wonderful to hold and touch and likes. But if one of our designers was saying, let's say they were designing a logo and they wanted to use rabbits as a reference, they could literally sit there and they could page through and post-it note rabbits in, books for eons. The idea was, if you could go to eBay and you could type in the word teapot, and all of a sudden these teapots that were for sale around the world showed up, then, we've got all the technology here. So we invented Logo Lounge. And the idea is you go to Logo Lounge as a member, you have lots of ways that you can search, but you put in the keyword rabbit, and what's going to happen is it's going to say, great, we've got 1,500 rabbit logos in here. With that as a keyword, and it pulls those up. Or you can say, I want just the good ones. So you can home down in, and there are ways that you can kind of go, well, just show me better ones, 750. Show me better ones than that, 350. Show me only the ones that have been in the books, 100 of them, so that you can use this as reference and research. And it's so highly contextualized that you can sit there and you can search by keyword or by industry or by designer or by the date or by regionality of it or where it's come from in the world. And there's so many ways you can search throughout this database. And 300,000 logos, which is about where they are, that's more than 250,000. I don't have 250,000 anything in my mind,
right?
That many logos, that are there and really quality.
So to me, another thing that's really cool is that this also spawned out of just you being a designer and you needing a resource and needing something. This wasn't like, hey, this is a great idea to make some money. This was something that came out of, and now you've brought us along and you've shared, and this is book 11. So this is not like
book 11
just you've grown this, but this was not your focus. This was just a part of something else you were doing on the side. This was a side project.
That's exactly it. And so this is kind of like my Christmas today, in a way, with all this going on. But in actuality, what you see back behind me is the rest of the office. So this is Gardner Design. We develop branding. And, and we've got a bunch of amazing designers that really do it really, really well. But we've always had this passion for identity design. So starting back in 2001, when we started this up, it kind of, you probably can't see a building, but it's a two-story building in here. And the upper level of this building is our conference room. And then back behind, there you go. It's on the old historic register, but back behind is part of this building, which is Logo Lounge. So it's got our people that are up there managing it, Ellen Healy and Ellen Mosman, who we all know as Elmo, and Troy Tabor. And they pull this together and manage this thing year round so that, it costs to have a membership, but it also costs to run this site and to be able to provide these, different resources to designers. But
it's really
enough with the commercial.
Inexpensive, to be honest. It's a really great resource for the amount of money that it is. It's really not that much.
The other thing, hey, you want a free account? You're an educator,
right?
And you were just talking about the class in Mississippi.
Yeah, my friend Kent.
Whether you know it or not, we've got a program called Logo Lounge Leap, which is just for educators. And we will set you and your class up with an account that is absolutely free of charge for your research. You can't upload to it, but you can use it totally for all the research that goes on. And if you will contact me, I'll put you in touch with, or
He
you
did.
can just.
He
There
did
you go.
last time.
Perfect.
He was watching last time. But here's the thing. A student
Yes.
can upload. They can get a cheaper membership, right? It's
Yep.
$50.
Exactly. So the
there's
$100 membership is $50 for students. They can pick that up while they're a student, and if they want to upload, or they can just, if they just want to use it as a resource, they can use it for free. So either
But
way.
it is a huge resource. And so teachers should, educators, whether it doesn't, I don't think it matters if it's, university or I guess even high school. There's some design.
Yep.
Kevin Green went to a high school
It's
that had
true.
design.
And we've got members in high schools as well as colleges, universities, design schools. It's, it's for educators and students.
Right. Okay. So
we're done commercial.
So one of the things that I love when I talked to you at Creative South, one of the things that I love was that when we talked about work, or when we've done these tests and we've talked about, you have been growing your business for a good many years. It's not like last week was your first week, right?
Yep.
So lots of things have changed. I think I even mentioned last time Joe Bosak. I think we talked about how Joe does a ton of branding for schools, and
he's amazing, by the way.
He is.
We worked together actually on the Wichita State project. He did the shopper,
cool.
and we did the school's identity. So,
well, he's going to be on the show maybe in January.
You're so lucky.
We got to get a date settled down. But to be able to have worked in the 80s and then now, you can't be designing the same. You have to be able to be flexible. But there are some things that you have maybe innately, maybe it's personality, because you have a great personality, but there's some things that you learn as you go about running a business.
Sure.
So some things about being things in the office, but one of the things I wanted to talk about was about mastering that client buy-in. So how do you know? So, when you're first starting out in the 80s, it's harder to sell a client, or whenever, even if it's today, right? It's harder. You're straight out of school or you're just getting started. It's harder to sell somebody because you don't have that. All you have behind you is maybe a degree or a piece of paper or some work, a portfolio behind you if you don't have a degree with it. So how has that changed? And because one of the things I think a lot of people have, no matter where they are in their phase, is it's about the sell. You have to sell them on why this logo, why they wanted the one with the purple thing, but you really think the one with the orange thing is better. And you have to explain to them why. And I always think of it, how I talk about it in school is, you're the lawyer and you're doing your case. You can't just say, well, I feel like he's innocent. No, you have to prove that he's innocent, and you have to prove why that logo is better.
Yep.
So can you talk a little about how that changed?
So here, let me try and give your audience a frame of mind to kind of pursue this in. And this is going to sound wrong initially, but let me just say it. Quit thinking about yourself. Think about your client. And I'm not scolding anybody. What I'm doing is I'm saying, you know what? Through school, you're working on projects that may have been assigned to you, but you're pretty much going, I think I'm going to do a logo for a toy company, or I think I want to do something for, you've gotten to that point now where no longer do you get to pick and choose your clients. you can to some degree, but I mean, the projects that you're going to be working on, people have, they're investing their money in you, and in fabricating this because they need an outcome. And a little bit of business never hurts. They're looking for a return on investment, an ROI. And, all of a sudden we're talking business, we're designers, and we're kind of going, I want to design something really cool. Well, you can still design really cool stuff. And that's important because you're going to show the client the value in that. But the first thing that you have to do is move yourself from that designer's perspective and into the client's perspective and what their objectives are. And you've got to realize that your client really doesn't care what shade of green you do. Your client doesn't really care if that line is of equal weight. You do. These are things that you still need to be conscious of, and you still need to be, in order to create great design for them, you still have to have that aesthetic, license in your mind that that I'm not going to give that up. But at the same time, you really have to realize what the client has asked you to do. So when a client comes to you and says, I want you to design a logo for me, what are they really asking? They're not really asking for a picture. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll kind of go, what do you think a good brand is going to do for you? And let them kind of explore that with you. Let them talk to you, because pretty soon you're going to find out that they really haven't given a great deal of thought to this. And one of the things that you do as a designer is you help them understand what it really does. And you've got to get yourself out of that perspective of, well, it's going to look cool.
Right.
Well, the fact that it looks cool doesn't turn it into dollars for them. And, what they're doing is they're investing in you because they want to see that return on investment. So really,
and it is a lot of times it's a really big investment. And so then people have come to you because there's maybe you've won awards, or your notoriety, or it's word of mouth, but it's also that and sometimes they don't have an idea exactly of how it's going to be used for.
Sure.
So a lot of it's in asking the right questions, right?
Yep. One of the things that there are a couple of things that I'll share with audiences, and you and I have talked about this, but you happen to know that I have a. By the way, I'm sitting here looking at what I'm wearing. I've got to comment on what I'm wearing because it might be knocking out lights. This is actually a Logo Lounge jacket, and there's the Logo Lounge patch. And you probably saw some of these down at Creative South, but we went out because when Logo Lounge goes out and does an event, we bought on eBay. We went in and we typed in ugly orange jacket, and we bought everything that came up. And we put patches on them, and we wear these things to events. So this being Halloween, we keep them in the closet in the back of the office, and I didn't have anything, so I just pulled it out and I put it on there's my outfit today. Okay, enough with that.
It works.
So excellent, glad to hear it. So let's go back to this. I have 2 degrees. I have a degree in business, and I have a degree in fine arts, which is in design. And I started out in business, and not knowing I was going to go into design, but loved design and ultimately ended up going there. So I, to some degree, have this kind of double mind perspective of, I probably maybe understand business a little bit better than some designers do. So I know what people are looking for to some degree, but it's no great secret. Here is the big difference between the brain of a person in business and the brain of a designer. Is that what we do as designers is highly subjective. And subjective is an important word here. What business does is highly objective. Okay, quick definition difference. If I take 10 designers, pick out your best friends, and you pull them together, Diane, and we say, here's this project, come up with a logo for it. All 10 of them are going to come up with entirely different logos.
Right.
They could all be genius logos, just amazing logos that really capture that client. If I go to 10 accountants and I give them a column of numbers and I say, add these up, they better damn well all come up with the same final figure on the bottom. So in business, there are often very objective answers that they are looking for. And especially when you go into the office of a C-level person, CEO or a CFO especially, the first thing the CFO is going to ask is he's going to say, or she's going to say, can you show me where the return on investment on this is going to exceed how much I'm going to pay for it? So you go in and you're going to sell them a brochure and you're going to charge them $20,000 to do that brochure. Can you show me where that's going to make $21,000?
Right.
Can you show me how that's going to bring money back to me? And that's always a challenge, and especially in marketing, is, how do you prove something like that? I mean, no project would ever get off the ground unless somebody in that C-level position is able to see the subjective side of this long enough or at least have somebody nudge them to sign that check or give you that credit card number so that you can actually do this project. And so much of that is building that relationship with the individual. So, some clients happen overnight, but most clients are years in the making.
So how, that was my first question. How do you obtain? So back in 83, how were you obtaining clients? And you kind of talked about this last time, but I want you to kind of go back to that. What were you doing at the beginning of your career? Because I think you kind of happened into it. It wasn't like, oh yeah, today I'm going to go out and get some clients.
Yep. So again, I come from an entrepreneurial family, and the first thing that you as a designer are going to do is start to look at those contacts that you have, and it may be people that you go to church with, or it may be people that are family members, or it may be the person down the block, or an acquaintance of, your parents or something like that. I mean, there's always those out there. And honestly, those are some of my very first clients, in there is people that I've just started to develop a relationship with. I will also tell you that word of mouth always, hands down, beats any other kind of marketing that's out there. Is a client that recommends you to somebody they know. And that means that, you've got to do a pretty amazing job for that individual, for them to be willing to tell somebody else. Diane does such an amazing job. She really took care of me, and she really was concerned and empathetic. And I know that she knew what was going on here, and she invested the time. So a lot of this is about developing those people over an extended period of time. And I think I told you, and feel free to remind me, because who knows what I tell people if I can ever remember it again. But it's, one of the very first things that I did as a designer was, instead of joining a design group, and I did that. I mean, I was the founder of the AIGA chapter here in Wichita, so I certainly did that. But was to join the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Was to start to meet folks in business, because designers are not going to hire you.
Right.
It's going to be a business person that's going to hire you, and that's how you're going to develop your reputation.
It's where the need is. You don't go to somebody who's already cutting their grass. If you have a lawn service, you go to somebody whose grass needs cutting or their bushes need trimming, and say, hey, I can offer you this. So you have to know where to put your best skills. So doing something of the
perfect statement that you just made, because I know so many designers that sit there and they will look at companies that are out there, and they'll go, God, I would love to work for Burton Snowboard. Guys, Burton's already got it covered.
Right.
They don't need you. I'd love to work for Urban Outfitters. Guys, Urban Outfitters already got it covered. They don't need you. I'm not to dissuade anybody, but it's those companies that you idolize and look at out there, that you admire the work that has been done for them. Look at somebody else and say, I want to make them a Burton Snowboard.
Right.
Or, I want to make them the next fill in the blank.
Well, and I think that with students, I know that we've got Kent's class still, and hopefully my students maybe listen sometimes, but I think that it's when you decide where you want to work, you can't work and just do the same kind of work. You have to, that return on investment for you when you're looking for a job, you have to be, or a new client, you have to see something that they aren't doing, that you have skills that they don't already possess, so that now they can offer more offerings. So say, let's go back to the lawn care.
Sure.
I have a mower, but you have a weed eater or a bush trimmer or something. Now, if you come on board with me, now we can trim bushes and do the mowing. But before that, I could only mow. So it's kind of like with this new person. And I feel like some of it's just explaining that a lot of clients can be very tight with their money. They don't really know how this is really going to make that big of a difference. But if you kind of have them envision where they want to go, I don't know if you ask, I always ask my clients, I say, what are your 5-year or 10-year goals? Where do you want to be, especially for branding? Because then you make them think about, is this a store? Is this, what does this university look like? Even though if it's a university that was established a long time ago, how does the university change? How does this logo help change that university.
So Diane, when you do a project, do you put together, and some people do this occasionally, some people do it all the time, but do you put together some kind of a design brief?
I do. And I actually sit usually, I feel like there's something, I think we should do something called design therapy, because really that's what the
Yep.
initial contact with the client is. It's like a 2-hour for me, because I'm trying to get to know them and understand. And sometimes I'm not always the best fit. So I will try to fit, and as I've learned, you probably will do a custom typeface for somebody. I can't do that. I don't have anybody on my team that can do that. So I'll send it to somebody else.
Sure.
But but now that's a question that I ask, if they want something completely customized like that. So again, you learn as you go and things change. I used to always ask, what's your mission statement? Now that's not the cool word to ask, now we talk about core values. It'll go back around, but do you know what I'm talking about? Like that's one of those statements.
So everyone that's listening out there, if you were going to go on a trip somewhere and you packed and you got road snacks and you fueled up the car and you got in the car and you started it up and you pumped the gas and you said, oh, I don't know where I'm going.
Right.
You probably didn't know where you're going. You didn't pack the right clothes because you didn't know if you're going where it was hot or cool, or if it was a long trip or a short trip. So how can you possibly jump into a design project if you don't know where you're going? And the design brief is the roadmap that we use, which really tells our designers what it is we're trying to do. And here is the ironclad best thing about a design brief. And a design brief can just be a page. It can be 2 or 3 pages. It can be more than that, depending on how much you want to charge them. And by the way, clients love to pay for words. They really do. They find greater value in words than they do in our design sometimes. But when you provide a design brief based off of that meeting that you have had with them about here's where we see this going, and you come to a mutual agreement on that, when you actually get to that point where you're ready to present to them, you're responsible for making sure that what you have designed meets the criteria and the objectives in the brief. But here's the secret to it, is that when the client looks at it and you say, well, let's see, it meets our criteria here and here and here, and these are your objectives, and it meets here and here. It's hard for them to go, well, I don't like it. They may not personally like it, but as long as it meets those criteria that you've laid out inside of the design brief, then you have succeeded. And if at that point they go, well, did you think about doing so-and-so? Then you've just opened the door to another project or additional funds for this project. And, the fact that they've agreed at the beginning of the project where this is going keeps them from playing that game with you where you're going, oh man, they keep changing their mind about what it is they want. This gives you the focus that you need. It's that roadmap that you need.
But it's that shared thing between you and the client. So mastering that client buy-in means that you, in the very beginning, after you've listened to them, you create a brief and you create a set of goals that this logo will do. This logo,
or anything that you do, this video will do, or this package will do, or that, So
what would be an example of maybe a project that you've done in the past that you what do you remember what some of the objectives or the goals that you were saying, hey, because this is something Ian Paget and I know you're friends with him too.
Oh yeah.
He does. I say, well, what do you do when somebody comes back and says, well, I just don't like it. Can you try this? Because this is exactly it, but it meets these 3 criteria that we established together. So can you give me an example of a criteria?
Yeah, and I will, but let me jump back to something you just said about, when you come to that client and they said, well, I just don't like it. And especially with young designers, this is something that you will never be able to satisfy every client that you have. Just but you got to try damn hard because it's your reputation you're trying to satisfy here, that you want to maintain. But if you have a client that believes that, okay, let me use this as an example. If I tell you that for $5,000, I'm going to design you a logo and we'll just keep going until we get you a logo that you like, then you've just given yourself a life sentence, because they will continue to run you back and back and back and back until they see it and they know it. And that's the worst thing you could ever have from a client, is a client that says, "Oh, well, I'll know it when I see it," because
Right.
that's no kind of a roadmap to work towards. So as long as they understand, and this is part of the design brief, is when I come back to you based on this design brief, we're going to show you 5 logos. We'll show you 8 logos, whatever. If they know that if they go into another round, that it's going to cost them money, then all of a sudden they're not going to be as anxious to say, well, I just don't see anything I like. Because what they're really saying is, I'm just not ready to make a decision yet.
Right.
And so you've got to put some kind of parameter on them to keep yourself from running yourself to death on this. So let me go back to your question, which was what are those criteria that you put into a design brief? And yeah, the design brief, is built out of that group of meetings that may be at the very least a couple of hours to literally weeks of, depending on the scale of project and what you're doing and the number of people you're going to be talking to. You could have an entire group of stakeholders, a board of directors, or owners of the business, or it may be family members, or it may be with the employees, and somebody may want you to visit with some of their clients, or to investigate further some of the competition. So when we come back to that client with the design brief, typically we generate about 3 paragraphs at the opening, which kind of are a summary of what this project is before we ever even start to get into the rest of the materials. We typically will put together a very modest SWOT in there. And for anybody who's not familiar, SWOT stands for, it's SWOT, and it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I suggest that you look it up if you're not familiar.
It's a business thing, right?
Yeah,
So they do this in businesses.
They'll get it. Strengths. We say, strengths. You have a good, you're well recognized in the community. You have the right tools necessary to perform your jobs. Opportunities. You might want to hire, more people in the future, or expand to a different city. Threats. Somebody else may, so-and-so is expanding their business, so they might come in and take that chunk of business, which currently you are the only ones that have. So SWOTs, it starts to identify those areas that you need to be concerned with in there as you're thinking through this project that you're going into with them. Then we always talk about the personality of a company, and this is getting deeper. And by the way, I've got to just throw this out there. So if anybody is familiar with LinkedIn Learning, which used to be lynda.com, go there. It is well worth your membership for the amazing courses that they have online learning. And actually, if you go to Lynda, lynda.com, and type in Bill Gardner, one of the things that you're going to see there is a course on identity discovery, which is exactly what I'm explaining right now, which is an hour course that kind of goes into greater depth on this. But when we talk about personality, there was a study that was a thesis that was actually created by Jennifer Aaker, who was from Stanford here back in the late 90s. And she figured out that companies, much like individuals, have personalities. Well, we all kind of knew that, but what she did was she boiled it down to what she refers to as the big 5, which are those 5 personality headers that have many traits under them. But the 5 are sincerity, excitement, competence, sophistication, and ruggedness. And within each of those 5, you start to track that down. If I were to say sincerity, I might have Coca-Cola, I might have Disney, Campbell's Soup, Pillsbury, companies that are many times family-oriented, authentic, wholesome, honesty, their word is their bond. Excitement might be Urban Outfitters. It might be Verdant Snowboards. It might be, and it depends on who the audience is you're talking to. To me, Airbnb is kind of exciting. It may be nothing to a younger audience, but it's something that gets your adrenaline pumping and gets you excited. The third is competence. It's the companies like Federal Express or Alexis or KitchenAid or, something you press the button, it's assured that it's going to turn on. It's a guarantee. Google, there you go. The sophistication is kind of interesting because it cuts two ways. Sophistication could be for those who have a level of aspiration that want to be sophisticated, and it can also be those that have already reached a level of attainment in their fashion brands. It might be somebody that wants a Burberry scarf and always wears Burberry, but they can't afford their rent payments. They're tied to Burberry. It could be expensive liquors. It could be, bless your mother's soul. It could be expensive cars.
It could be Dyson vacuum cleaners, right?
Yep.
That has a different sophistication. It could be price. It's an expensive vacuum, but
here's what you're starting to touch on that's going to be really important. Let me throw out ruggedness real quick, which is Dodge Ram, Levi jeans, Caterpillar, so on and so forth, Timberland. But no company is just any one of these.
Right.
They're usually a blend. And here's how this works into a designer's vernacular. When we meet with a company, we come up with an agreement with them that you are 80% competence and 20% sophistication. If that happens to be how it kind of boils down. If you were to think about Apple, what's Apple? Apple is a certain percentage of sophistication and a certain percentage of competence and a little bit of excitement, depending on what the products are in there.
Right.
Doesn't hit ruggedness, doesn't hit sincerity. Nike, what's Nike?
Excitement?
Nike is excitement and ruggedness. And there's a bit of competence in there. So it's usually 2 or 3 of these, and you look at the percentages. So as you are looking at logos, I want you to think about this. Pull up some logos sometime and kind of go, okay, how do I see this logo? Is it rugged? So if you design something for a rugged company, what are you going to do? Probably not thin little type.
Right.
It's probably going to be heavy. There's probably going to be some weight to it. It's probably going to be solid, kind of use of shape in there, as opposed to, think back to Disney and Coca-Cola and Campbell's. Those are all script, aren't they?
Right.
It's this personal kind of, not that that's always the answer for that, but you'll start to be able to kind of break identities out this way. So we actually build that into this design brief saying, okay, this is how we see your company. How do you see your company? And you also have to kind of go, where do you want to see your company? That's back to something you said earlier. It's looking at who they are 5 years or 10 years down the road, because we never design for who somebody is right now.
Right.
We design for who you're going to be. So it's, so this is what a design brief looks like. And again, if you go onto lynda.com or LinkedIn Learning and look my name up under discovery and logo, you'll find the entire process. But it's really important.
So let me ask you a question.
Please. Yeah.
So what about? So
I got pretty into it there. I'm sorry.
I think that was awesome. I think everybody in the chat is also like, I took so many notes at the bottom of my page. I'm going to have to flip my paper over. But I love that. So I talk about personality. I'm actually going to now start using this because I think this is really great.
Jennifer Aker, by the way, Aker, I believe. Look her up.
Okay, I will. So when did you start doing that? Because right out of business school, did you start doing this? No. Or did you, so when, because again, I don't want people to be like, oh my God, they're doing this wrong, but you can start today, right? You can start today making these changes. Yeah. So, but when in your career?
Our process is continually changing. It almost embarrasses me when people say, so what's your process? And I sit there, well, You mean on the last time I did it? What was it like then? So, you're going to acquire these things over an extended period of time. And I probably didn't start really in with looking at, we've always talked about brand personality, but this was a way that I could actually objectify it, that I could, start to bring it back in such a way that I could share it with that C-level person so that they understood it.
Well, and it also gives you those objectives to be more objective at the end when you're presenting
Exactly.
the logo, to say, hey, we said it wanted to be 80% rugged and 20% exciting. This is what our factors are, because those are the things I think that are harder for designers to say, well, I'm talking with my client. How do we know when it is done? Because they're not happy. So that's one example, is personality. Did I get personality? What would be another example of like a goal?
Here, think of this just real quick, and then I'll shift off of that, which is that unless your tongue is much more skilled than mine, the difference between Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola is nominal. There are a couple of colas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like Coke, but Coca-Cola is squarely in sincerity from a personality standpoint. Pepsi-Cola is squarely in excitement from a personality standpoint. Yet they're both sugar water.
Right.
If I were to take mineral water and I were to say, here's a can of LaCroix, and here's a can of Canada Dry, and I were to pour them for you into a glass, you may not be able to tell me the difference, but LaCroix is definitely geared towards a millennial and a younger market. Canada Dry is geared towards a senior market, so it's a personality thing that divides, the content, that product is homogenous. So design ends up determining which one of those products the person buys, because the product is basically identical in them. But that design that you put into it is going to determine who's going to be excited about buying it. Other things that ultimately go into the design brief. A lot of times what we will do is we will find words that we find are descriptive of this particular client, traits that we can associate with them. And it may be integrity or honesty or forward thinking, or and the unfortunate thing is I've never had a client that didn't say, well, we've got integrity and we're honest and we're forward thinking, because everybody says those things. But you start looking for those things that are unique to them. The other thing that is most valuable to me is I find that when I go in to talk to a client as we're gathering this information, that and some of it is very intuitive for me, and it's hard for some people, that I don't go in with a set group of questions. Maybe it's because I've asked these questions enough time. But I also know, and I'm willing to bet you're the same way, that some of my favorite places I have ever been in my life were places I didn't plan to go to. They were places that I unexpectedly along the road took a detour and discovered them. And those are some of the best memories that I have. And companies are like that. When you get to talking to somebody, they have already thought about the fact that I want to tell them about so-and-so, and I want to tell them about so-and-so, and their answers are going to be highly skewed. And you really want to get to know the personality of this company as you're developing this brief. So chase some squirrels. When you're talking to them, follow some directions that are unexpected, that they weren't planning on you going down. And let it opens up their candid conversation with you. And some of the very best identities that we've ever crafted, best brands, are based off of little nuances and stories that we never anticipated were coming. Years ago, there's a substantial clinic here in Wichita that was started by some doctors, but it was in the early days of holistic medication. And So it was kind of alternative medication, if you will.
Mhm.
And they were looking at people's diets and a lot of things that people look at today, but maybe, 20, 30 years ago weren't looking at so much.
Right.
And we were interviewing the administrator there, and she had this beautiful pearl necklace on. And the founder of this organization had passed away a number of years ago. And she says, yes, Dr. Reardon gave me this pearl. Do you know the story behind it? And I said, no, I don't. And she said, well, if you think about it, Dr. Reardon thought that this clinic was kind of like a pearl from this perspective. A pearl is basically a piece of sand or a burr that gets inside of an oyster. It is an irritant. And that irritant, the oyster starts coating the outside of it until it becomes this pearl. And he says he always looked at this clinic as kind of like an irritant to the rest of the medical community.
Right.
That he knew that if it was an irritant, it would allow them to think with and deal with him, and create this coating around them, if you will, to make them more valuable to the rest of the world. And ultimately, we did this beautiful identity based off of this idea of a pearl inside of this oyster shell, that it was much deeper than that. But it ended up becoming a talking point for them. As they would talk to other people, they were able to share this story because it so perfectly described what they were capable of doing and what they had been doing for years. So,
but now it was an analogy that everybody could use, right?
Yes,
now it was
exactly.
A story.
Yep. So
I love that. That's a beautiful story.
Isn't that a great story?
It is. It's okay. So you kind of touched on this. We're only on question 2, so we'll probably have to do a part 2 here, Bill.
Okay.
Okay. So do you think? So you have you're very good with people. You're very warm. You have a great personality.
As are you.
Thank you. So, but you don't take over, right? Like you definitely have a way of putting it so that people also feel important, which I think is probably one of your superpowers when you're talking to a client, that it's not, some designers are like, it's about me, what I can give you. But I really do feel like you're coming in and you're being part of the team. And you really listen. So how do you feel like personality and warmth helps you build trust with those clients early on?
Yeah. So because part of it's innate with me, it's, it's.
But how would somebody who
sure.
they're not a extrovert, and how could somebody, so maybe somebody on your team that you've taught this, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's almost nothing more embarrassing than when people on my team are in a meeting and they start talking to the client, and I'm realizing that they're sharing my stories, which and they're welcome to. But I mean, it's kind of like they're asking the questions that I'm accustomed to asking, and I'm going, I love it. They've learned this. This is so cool.
Right.
I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but let's start with this. When you go into a meeting, stop and listen. Because obviously you've got things that you want to share with them, but they're the ones that are potentially going to be paying you to do something for them, and they want to share their story. They've given this a lot of thought and consideration. Before they've, if you've set a meeting with them, they've spent a couple of days thinking about what it is they want to share with you, and let them take that time to share that information. Now, that doesn't mean you can't guide them. You ultimately are going to have your pat, information, your boilerplate information you're going to share about, here's the value of design and here's what design can do for you. But as you're listening to them, start kind of gathering, make notes. And by the way, that's such a critical thing. If you're going to listen to somebody, I don't care if it's on your computer or if it's on a pad of paper, if it's analog or digital, take notes. 1, because you need to, but 2, There's nothing more embarrassing than a person who sits there and listens attentively, and the person's kind of going, well, back in, 2014, we had $526,000 worth of revenues, and they're sharing information with you you're not going to remember.
Right.
And they know that. They're expecting you to take notes. So, I mean, that's one of the ways of consciously showing that you have an interest in what they're telling you. The other thing
do you ever care if somebody's doing it digitally? If somebody, I mean, I can tell if a client cares if I'm doing it digital or analog.
You know what? Well, in the first place, I always take analog notes, but I've got people here. I write it down, pad of paper. But I have people here that take a computer into the meeting and will take it down digitally. I've never really noticed a difference, but then again, I'm always analog myself.
But you know what I think can be? So my sister is complete digital. I think it's about eye contact. You have to know. So if you can type and look at the person, that's a huge part of it to me. Yep. Because I can write. They know I'm writing. I'm not just doodling, right? But if you can make eye contact while you are, I think eye contact is really important. So whether you're digital and you're like, whenever I'm looking down, I'm just taking notes, right? I'm filling up my paper.
I'm loving it. Yeah.
But I also think that people can do it digitally, but you have to be able to give eye contact. And so that people know that you're not just texting somebody or typing.
Nothing is quite the kiss of death as them thinking that you're just not paying attention to them.
Right. Which can be a big part of a digital.
Do you know what? Did we talk about this? I had this conversation with somebody, and that really is especially if you are taking notes on your phone, because I was in a meeting where somebody was taking notes on their phone, and I just kind of kept looking over there. It was somebody from my team, and I was kind of going, really?
Pay attention,
Are
right?
you, and I thought they were kind of like on their phone, texting somebody, and then it dawned on me, they're taking notes. Think about the frame of mind. It's going to change. If you're talking to somebody who's 50 or 60 or, they're going to have a different perception of it than if you're talking a millennial to a millennial or something like that.
Right. But I think that it's important in those beginning conversations to say to the client, hey, you know what? Judy's going to take her notes on her phone. I just wanted to point that out. She's, just so that if it is somebody from another generation or you can just kind of tell.
Yeah.
So I think kind of getting that stuff out in the beginning, then, or you can say, hey, in the beginning, Judy can say, hey, do you mind if I take my notes on my phone?
Yeah.
I think that then people won't think that you're texting or doing
think that's
something.
Probably a smart idea. I think, if that comes up, if you're using your phones, otherwise, I've also learned how to write without looking at my pad. I keep looking down for my bearings occasionally, but I don't have to be looking at the pad to be able to do that. What a great line of thought. And I'd never really given that a lot of consideration, but you're absolutely right. I mean,
I think you're doing it innately. Yeah. So I'm always trying to figure out ways for people who aren't doing it innately. They feel awkward or they're doing something. I'm like, well, here's some like soft skills that I think, and you and I talked about this last time, you were always looking, you were the baby. So you had to kind of judge and see what
the older siblings were doing wrong. That doesn't work.
So that you didn't do that. And I think your dad was a salesman and he was a politician and he was doing all these things. So you were watching. And so you saw how people reacted from an early age. And I think if that's not somebody else's story, then they have to know how to recreate that, because I don't want it to be one thing. I always think with Design Recharge, it's about hope. And so you can learn these things too. These are just skills. Just like somebody learned how to type, you can also learn how to have better eye contact, and it may be uncomfortable, or you can learn how to talk to strangers or ask the right questions. And so
you got your superpowers, and you talk about that a lot, about what people's superpowers are. And I think that we all have our own. And it's, the last thing I want to do is try and make people believe that they have to conform to a certain, methodology in order to achieve something. Because again, we're subjective, and we all have a different kind of approach to achieving it. There are people that are much more successful than I am, or highly successful, that, don't, follow the same path that I do. I will tell you that uh, my humor, I think, has always played kind of an important part in my conversations with a client. I think it puts them at ease a little bit. It keeps them from feeling that everything has to be, it gives away a little bit of my human quality to them. In there, and they don't feel like everything is so buttoned down in there. And I want for people to be happy, and I think
humor has one of those things that it's this, you take a chance. And I think that's how you've had to do it. And this is probably the last question we're going to get to today, but
that's okay.
How do you get people to take a chance on something that feels uncomfortable for them? And I think we talked about this with the WSU, maybe the wayfinding or something, because it's so beautiful. And I'm going to pull it up, but if that's what you want me to pull up. But how do you get somebody, because I think it does have to do with personality to some extent. And maybe that's where the humor is, because sometimes a joke's going to land and sometimes it's not, but you have to be willing to try.
Well, mine always land. I'm not going to throw it out there unless it works. It's no. You have to
try, right?
And feel free to pull the WSU signage up if you'd like. So one of the things that I always share with clients is that I like to work with people who have good design courage. I think courage is a really wonderful word to use with your clients, because everybody wants to believe they have courage. But it says a little bit about a willingness to take a chance. This happens to be a wayfinding project that she's showing you that we did for Wichita State University. We had developed their logo. Those little kernels of wheat that you see on those were actually part of the logo of the Wichita is called the wheat shockers, which are those stacks of wheat that you used to see, there you go, out in a field back when farmers used to shock their wheat or stand it up out in the field before they would let it dry and then harvest it. Anyway, long story short, when we meet with a client, and Wichita State is a perfect example of this, one of the things that we say is, there are, and I'm willing to bet you've probably heard this statement before, but people can have three different types of impressions of you. They can have a positive impression, they can have a negative impression, or they can have no impression at all. And the standing thing is always to say that the absolute worst in there is that they have no impression at all. Right. And the way that I change that up is to explain to people that we design in such a way that we're just a little bit more aggressive than you may feel comfortable with. But by being a little bit more aggressive, what we do is we eliminate the no impression whatsoever.
Memorable. You get memorable, right?
We shift away from no impression. And even though we may raise your negative impressions just a hair, we're going to vastly outpace that by raising your positive impressions with people. And that seems to be something that they understand. This signage program, if you'll pause right about there, these signs were actually just a piece of work to make, but beautiful. That's a half-inch aluminum material there that is curved like a taco shell, if you will. And those pieces are cut out of that, and the throat of these pieces are yellow, and you can move on. Okay. The outside of them are black. Except for the wayfinding one, which you're...
So is it kind of cut in so the outside layer was yellow and then the inside layer was black?
Yeah. So you scroll on either way, you'll get, there you go. That's the traditional signage, which the exterior of them is black and the throat of them is yellow.
Oh, right.
It'll tell you when the sun is just coming down, and you can even see on there the gradation, the color, and the glow. It's just amazing to have the light come kind of casting through these, and the shape of the sign itself, that blade, kind of bent over, is kind of like a piece of wheat, and kind of like the logo reflects that. So it just worked really incredibly on this particular campus.
That's awesome. And I love how you can see through, you're obviously seeing through the yellow to the yellow inside, but I just love love that piece. I think it's a beautiful.
And again, it's a story where they had the courage to do something unique and wanted to be able to stand out, and it's had such an incredible impact on the entire student body out there and the school itself to kind of have a sense of knowing who they are.
Well, and pride in what they're doing.
Yeah.
So we also talked about this. I want to just
yeah,
so,
sure.
Again, so we have Tex-Mex. So you did a menu, and this, to me, it's like, hey, how did you get somebody to take a chance?
How did we get them to buy into that?
So I love this story. Can you share?
Yeah, this is Carlos O'Kelly's, and Carlos O'Kelly's is a regional Tex-Mex kind of restaurant, and they were in a position where their stores were getting dated, and they were going to go in. They shut down a few stores, and they were opening up a few others, and they wanted to entirely wholesale clean the thing bottom to the top, and redo the interiors and everything. And what we did on this was we pretended that basically we were in some village in Mexico, and that we had to create a menu out of things that we found on the street. So it was kind of like bits and pieces and shards of papers and wrappers, and the typography and all of these elements came together with this amount of grunge in there, and it's got some real grit to it. But at the same time, there's this wonderful kind of spark of color that goes on in here, and there's this kind of spark of authenticity. The photography is still nice and the likes, but when you look at all of these materials together, not just the menus, but the signage for the place and the inside, you get this sense that, there was context, that somebody thought about this project from the bottom up, and that all the pieces merged together.
Well, it just really has a lot of fun. I actually don't think that the photos of the food is as important as the rest of it, because it's setting the tone. I do think the margarita is important. But
and to be honest, all the photography was in their archive at the time we were working. So it was a matter of what can we do with this existing photography to kind of incorporate it into this. But it ended up having a dramatic impact on their own customer base. And it lifted the aesthetic to the point that people sensed that, it wasn't just another night at Carlos O'Kelly's, putting the sombrero on because it was my birthday. It really was, just a great experience.
It was an ROI, right? You had a return on your investment by doing this. You were able to increase price or increase, they had more people coming in. They were able
to up their sales. It was one of those things where, everybody kind of agreed across the board that it just changed the personality in such a way that the people that worked there felt much better about it. The people that came there felt much better about it, just a change of personality across the board.
Yeah. So Emily says margaritas are important for sure. So I guess for me, having those pieces and being able to kind of get somebody to trust you, I think that is definitely one of your superpowers. But I think they trust you because you listen and you really understand maybe what they're doing. But we had talked about this last time. And I wanted to say this. I think one thing a lot of designers don't do is we don't come back and ask them, hey, how are you doing this week? Or how you've launched the menu, how's last month? How are your numbers? Because we get done and it's over. But really, if we want to kind of be more of that team partner, we can say, hey,
I'm so glad you're serving as my memory here, because, there's so much that we've talked about, but that really is true. I mean, if, imagine you have a friend that goes into the hospital and you go up to the hospital to visit them and, kind of check in as a mandatory check-in, but you never get back to them. Would you ever do that? Probably not. They're your friend. And, you have a level of commitment to them. So you want to know how things are. And think of clients in the very same way, not necessarily thinking of them in the hospital, but think of them as, they've made an investment in you. And there's no greater sign of a huckster than, somebody that you never see again.
Right.
Have you ever heard? I'm going to go off on my little side tangent here for just a second and share a last story. Somebody told me the definition of blue sky laws. Have you ever heard of blue sky laws? And I never knew that blue sky laws were such a bad deal, but this was a attorney that was sharing this. So back at the turn of the last century, and I'm here in Kansas where rain is really important, especially if you want a crop to come in.
Right.
And when there would be a drought, rainmakers, there really were rainmakers, would show up with these contraptions and these machines that they would say, here, now this is going to make rain, but what you've got to do is you've got to crank this thing. Now the whole community's got to get behind this. You've got to crank this thing and turn it for a week. And after you've done this for a week, then you're going to have rain come in. So they would sell them this thing. And the reason they had them crank that thing for about a week was because it gave them enough time to get far enough away that you couldn't catch them when you found out it didn't make rain. That it didn't make rain because after a week you still had blue skies. So that's where blue sky laws came in, was, you know, somebody coming in and selling you a load of goods and then just leaving. And don't find yourself in that position. I mean, if you've done a great job for this client, they are going to be a client of yours for life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if they aren't at that company for life, I guarantee where they go, they'll be your client there. So
because you're helping them grow their business.
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to get back to them and you want to find out how things turned out. You want to find out whether this menu ended up selling more margaritas or not. And if it didn't, why not? And let's figure that out. And let's work with them so that they can sell more margaritas. You know, they would much rather work with somebody who already, you know, knows them and they don't have to re-educate than to start all over. Always think about the client's frame of mind there, because, you know, ultimately the client wants good for themselves and they want you to do good. You know, it's a win-win for both of them.
So I have a client who gives me a monthly calendar and I have to put it up on the website. I'm not going to wait till the second to ask her for the calendar. I'm going to try to do it on the 20th. And then I just have a calendar reminder in me. So then she doesn't necessarily always think of me as like bugging her, but she knows I'm not going to let her miss that deadline. Not because it's important to me whether or not we're on the second or the first or whatever, but that she knows that I know that it's important to them to get that and meet that deadline. Sure. She's busy. So we just need to set, these might not be typical things that we always, always check on, but about the menu launched, you know, maybe we do a 1 month kind of talk and then we do
how important that is.
Part. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely important.
Amy says she wants a margarita. Well,
you know what? It's so easy. I'll be right back. I'm going to whip one up for Amy. I'll be right back. It'll just take now.
So, Bill, we are out of time, but I want to make sure everybody knows ways to get in touch with you, ways to follow you, and to make sure that
I'm a terribly hard person to get in touch with. No, I kid you. I'm Bill at GardnerDesign.com. Period. That's it. No, don't put a
Gardner is Gardner. That's correct.
Design.
So design.com. And so I'm going to put all these things up, but so you can always do logolounge.com. So don't forget about that.
Yes.
The Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn is Logo Lounge. On LinkedIn, it's logolounge.com or -com or something. And then Pinterest also. That Pinterest would be a great place for you to look at and follow Logo Lounge.
Yeah, you're naming things that I don't even know my addresses for, but my people do. So
I know, and they send it to me. So I'm putting all this in there. And then for Gardner Design, it's again, I'm gonna spell it because some people spell it with an extra E, you know. So I just want to make sure. So
it's our bad.
GardnerDesign. So Gardner Design. It kind of looks like nerd in the middle, really.
Hey,
but
I'm good with that.
I would be good with that too.
It's all good. GardnerDesign.com.
I will also put in the show notes and in the YouTube, if you're watching, the LinkedIn, the lynda.com or LinkedIn Learning with the actual link that they need to go to see that course that you have on the
cool.
The
I'm just realizing when you put that up, your little icon of your picture, are you laying on a blanket with a dog? What's your little picture?
Oh yeah, I don't see an icon, but
Well,
it's
when
just
it comes
I'm
up,
drawing
it picks
on
up your
a.
little icon. And it's kind of like you're lounging on a blanket outdoor. It's kind of like
am. It was I was trying to be sketching, and so somebody was taking pictures for me. So maybe not so good, but it's not wheat. I love the wheat in Kansas. Sure.
Yeah, I do too. It's part of our heritage, and it's such a wonderful story, the wheat here.
For sure. It looks like the ocean when you're driving across. When I used to live in Colorado and I would drive back, it looks like the ocean. It has waves like the ocean.
So here's what people don't realize is that the wheat goes in the winter. You plant it. So very early, and I'm talking like in February, March, you start driving through Kansas. It looks like we've got the most beautiful green grass you have ever seen. Wheat is actually it's in the grass family. So as it starts coming up, it just looks like, man, they have got the best green grass here. This is just amazing. And it's wheat, it's just kind of coming up and just starting. And by the time you harvest it, there's always a film crew that ends up sending their film crew to Kansas to harvest wheat or to film harvesting of wheat in the autumn. It doesn't happen in the autumn. It happens in the early summer. So, by that point, it's done. But wheat's our heritage.
For sure. And it's beautiful. So thank you so much. And
thank you.
Next week, we have a weird time because we're interviewing somebody in Singapore. Mai DeLion, she is a lettering artist, and she has an amazing story, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it. So I hope you guys will join. It's going to be at 8 p.m. our time, Bill, Central Time.
Okay, sweet. We'll log it in.
And so then it's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern, and you can 6 p.m. for Pacific Time. So it's going to be a little later than normal, but hopefully you guys will.
If anybody can manage it, you can.
I hope so. I think I'll be at home doing it, but we had a pretty good signal last time, so hopefully her and I will get it, and it'll be great. But she's really got a great story, a huge story of hope, and just really, really from.
That's great.
Super inspiring. So, Bill, thank you. And if you guys want,
happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween!
Atcha.
That's right. Oh, I didn't dress up, but you did for both of us.
No, it's all good. So go log on to Logo Lounge and watch the logos change, guys. Throw some on there.
For sure. And hopefully you guys get them in. I'm going to plop this up right now, and hopefully we'll see you next week. And you can always reach me on Twitter and Instagram at Design Recharge. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Diane.